All right, the community has chimed in and you want to know about video podcasting. So I'm going to bring you behind the scenes and my workflow, and we're even going to be talking about a video podcast with a host or a guest that's not in your studio. Let's get into it. What is going on, you beautiful humans? Welcome back to the channel. And today, yes, we're going to be talking about doing a video podcast. And this is building on a video that I did a while back, quite popular, when I mentioned a workflow or showed you a workflow when it comes to being able to record a podcast and working with a host or a guest that is not in the same space that you are. So a virtual co-host or a guest. We're going to be doing that with video today, but let me actually give you one caveat here, and I'm going to bring you behind the scenes. I'm going to show you what it takes. But what I will tell you is that when you add video to a podcast, you are definitely increasing your workload exponentially. It's pretty intimidating at first, but we're going to walk through it together, and hopefully I'll get you into a better mindset and space to where you can actually take this on. Now, before we get into the hardware, what I want to mention is that we're going to be using a Zoom call. So using the platform Zoom, and you could use this with Skype or something similar. I talked about Skype in the previous video, but we used Zoom, and I'm going to show you my workflow and how to set this all up and give you some options here, some alternatives that you could potentially use without getting all of the hardware. And I'm going to prioritize the hardware as I go along. So speaking of the hardware, let's get into it. So first and foremost, a podcast at its simplest form is audio. So just remember that, folks. Even when you're doing video, if your audio is not dialed in, people are going to tune out. Now, I will link everything below, and I will prioritize the hardware and what I think you need first. So first, you need a good microphone. And I do recommend the Audio-Technica ATR 2100 as my go-to. I've had this for years, and I'll give you a reason why. But there's also an alternative, the Samsung Q2U. And again, I will link everything down below in the description. But the reason being is that this is a microphone that not only can you start with, but you can actually really level up your game because it has the ability to connect via an XLR cable, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but simply it's going to connect via USB into your computer. And this is important, especially for the Zoom call, the way that we're going to set it up. Now, before we get into the additional audio hardware that I recommend, if you just have this microphone and just connecting it USB, you're not doing anything XLR, then simply put, you would just plug that into your USB port of your computer, and then you can have your call with someone on Zoom. And here's the thing, I get lots of questions about audio quality regarding the guest or the co-host. Now, if it's a co-host and somebody that you have regularly, they should actually have a really decent mic. Now, I always recommend a guest to at least at a minimum have some earbuds with a built-in microphone or something very basic on their end. And typically the people that you would be interviewing, I would assume they have been on podcast or will be in the future or somewhere in their career. And so they may want to invest in a very inexpensive microphone for themselves to dial in that audio on their end, because it's their brand too, not just your brand, but their brand. So something that you could do while having that Zoom call, I will link below an app called Zencastr. And this is something that you can go over there and give that a free trial. And what that will actually do is that you can record locally on your end and get that good audio that's laying down that track on your end. And then on their end, it actually grabs their audio. So you don't get when you're on a Zoom call or Skype and something freezes or the audio is a little questionable. Well, the thing about Zencastr is that it will record that audio locally on their end and your end, and then you will have two separate tracks that you can bring into your editor. Now, pivoting back over to the audio hardware, I either recommend an audio interface at a minimum, but what I would suggest to you is a handheld recorder. And if you've been around my YouTube channel here, and the reason being is that I can record locally. I can record into an SD card in here, get my track in here, and then also using a cable, and I'll talk about the setup here, and using this cable to also get a backup recording of what's happening in the Zoom call from my co-host and or guest coming through Zoom. So let's actually talk about how we're gonna do all of the connections. Now, the XLR cable comes from the microphone and goes directly into the Zoom into channel 1. That is my track. only my track. Then the USB cable out of the microphone goes into my computer, and that is actually going to feed my audio to my guest or host via Zoom. And then what I'm actually going to do is take a mono cable, so a cable that fits into a 3.5mm jack into a headphone out of the computer into track 2 of the Zoom, and not the Zoom software, but the Zoom handheld. And you need a TS cable, a mono cable. And I will link up an option below. And yes, the one that I do recommend, it actually has 2 1/4-inch cables or 2 ends. You just need one. It doesn't matter which one you use. It's just, you need a mono connection, because what ends up happening is sometimes if you used a stereo connection, it can loop back and feed audio back to your guests that you don't want fed back to them. Now, getting your software dialed in with the hardware, the USB cable that's already connected into your computer, make sure that in the Zoom settings that the microphone is the ATR or whatever microphone that you have purchased or that you have, that it's not the built-in microphone of the computer. So it's this microphone. Then the speaker or the audio out, that's gonna be the headphone jack of your computer. And so what that's gonna do is come out of the 3.5mm headphone jack of your computer and into track 2 of the Zoom handheld. Because when they talk to you, it's gonna get fed through the computer, out through the headphone jack, and into the Zoom. Now you might be asking, but how can I hear them? Well, with a set of headphones, you're gonna be plugging this in to the Zoom itself. You're going to hear yourself because you're connected via XLR into track 1. So anytime you talk, you can hear yourself, and anytime they talk, you can hear them, because the Zoom is the interface and separating those tracks, and that's where you can hear that audio via the headphones. Now, you can use earbuds if you want. I just have these Beats, although I recommend when you're editing your audio, I do use studio monitors that are behind that lamp there, but a pair of Beats or some earbuds or whatever, they'll be fine, but I can link up some options below. Now, if you're worried about the connection on their end or your end or getting decent audio, what I consider track 2 them is a backup track, because you could still use something like Zencastr to actually record their audio locally and then sync it up later just to make sure that everything syncs up, and then just get rid of track 2 in your Zoom. Does that make sense? So to reiterate, track 1, it's gonna be very clean because it's local right into the Zoom. Track 2 is them coming through Zoom, and if the audio is a little muddy, but you're using something like Zencastr where you're recording their audio on their end, then later they can send that to you, or you can actually get it into a file into like Dropbox or a cloud sharing platform via Zencastr, so you can just download that and bring it into your editing software, and then just get rid of track 2 altogether on the Zoom, because if the audio is muddy, you might as well use the cleaner audio on their end. Now, when you're ready to hit that record button, something that I like to do for my post-production to help out is to sync it up with a clap. So I basically go 3, 2, 1, clap, and then we both clap on each end, and you will see a spike in your audio track so that you can line that up in the editor. Because again, there's a little bit of delay, a little bit of latency between the two of you. So you wanna make sure that the tracks line up. And that's just a very analog, easy way to get things synced up. All right, so now that we've got our audio dialed in, let's actually briefly talk about the hardware. And you don't need cameras like this to film yourself, but if you have one laying around, then you certainly could do that. However, if you're on a Zoom call, you can record within the Zoom app, and you can use a webcam, which I have a webcam here, although not all webcams have great quality, and sometimes the webcam that's built into your computer has terrible quality, but remember, audio takes priority here. However, I actually use a smartphone to create a webcam or use it as a webcam because the camera in it is just better. So the smartphone's actually right there. I just left it up because I just wanted to go ahead and roll into this video after the podcast that we just finished recording. Now, I did use a piece of software on this iPhone here, Epoch Cam, and I'll link that up. And there's actually steps that will be very simple to set that up so that you can use your iPhone or a smartphone as your webcam with a Zoom call. And of course, Epoch Cam, it costs a little bit of money. There is a free version if you want, but I like the higher definition and more ability to adjust my video settings. But what I can tell you is that there may be a little bit of latency. So meaning that your camera may freeze up a little bit because it's working over Wi-Fi into the Zoom. And so if you have the option to do a hardwire setup like an actual webcam or something that you can connect, which you can connect the iPhone via some adapters, and I can link those up too if you would rather do a hardwire USB connection with the Zoom call to make sure that you don't have a lot of latency. But we actually had a little bit of latency. It was kind of hiccuping and freezing a bit, and having your video freeze it's not fun. But again, focusing on the audio, it's okay to have that frozen a little bit. Now, of course, once you've got your audio dialed in your video, we need to bring that into our editors. Now, of course, I'm gonna be using some editors that I already own, and I will link up some options when it comes to video editors and audio editors. Some are free and some may be paid. But again, if you're serious about video podcasting, you may actually have to make a little bit of an investment here. And one thing to note, that if you're doing a live stream, that's completely different. That's just something that if you're live streaming on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook and that video just lives out there, that's fine. Get your audio dialed in. I can't say that enough, because if you're really doing a podcast, people will tune out if the audio is just not dialed in. I've had so many people ask me about live streaming and doing the video and then the audio, and they're more focused on the video. Stay focused on the audio. So let's actually get in behind the scenes of the workflow here. I'm gonna show you what I would actually do and how I would set all of this up. All right, so over here on the editing workstation here, don't freak out. There's a lot going on, I know, but it's because I've got a couple of situations that could go wrong for you. So a couple scenarios I want to walk you through to help you avoid some mistakes. And we actually had something that cropped up, and I'm going to show you the solution so that you avoid this. We're not going to do any advanced video editing. This is just very broad strokes, because that would be a completely separate video. But we'll go with the video first, and then I will bring you into the audio only aspects of everything as well. So that'll be toward the end of this video. So in the video editor, what we have here, you're looking at where we recorded the Zoom call within the Zoom software. So you'll see these black bars, and I could edit this out and do something more advanced, but something that you could do is that you could click on this, and then what we could do is pull this down like this. And then what I did is I brought in a background. So I'm going to bring that background in. And I've already made that transparent. So you can see, if I bring that up, it's just a background. And so the podcast is called Where's the Airport? And so something that was kind of aligned with what we do. So we're down here at the bottom, and then the background is here that kind of fill that in. You could make your own custom background if you want to lay that in. I will link up a video editor that is cross-platform for both Windows and Mac OS, but if you have a MacBook, you should have iMovie already in there. You could use that because it's free. I love free. And the other video editor, Resolve, is also free, but it is very advanced. So that's why I'm not trying to talk you out of the video components, but editing video takes a lot of work. All right, so let's actually get rid of this. Let's just get rid of the background for a sec, and we'll just have us sitting here just so that we can kind of focus on what I wanted to highlight for you. So let me bring that back up. Now, remember when I talked about the clap and the audio spike? This is what we're looking at right here, is this audio spike. This is my track going into the handheld recorder. This is Marie's track separate. So the track that she recorded locally and then sent to me. This is the backup track that I have going through the Zoom software into the handheld, just so that I can line things up. And you can see we lined up the clap here, and then you can also see these waveforms here that are lining up with her. So what I could do is I could just go ahead and get rid of that. I'll just make it so that I won't delete it. I'm just going to get it out of the way. So we're only working with my track and her track. Now, here's another thing that I also want to make you aware of is that you will get an audio track in the video that you record from Zoom. I went ahead and just pulled that audio down to get rid of it. But I'm going to bring that up to show you what mistake happened. Now, in your video editor, what I always recommend, I've added a compressor to my track. So I'm going to go ahead and add a compressor to Marie's track. So I've already brought that up. I'm going to drag that in here. And what it does is it just brings that audio level up a little bit. And I can adjust the compressor. I can adjust the audio up and down however I need to. Again, we're not getting into the audio components of how you edit with compressors and things like that. I did a video on that. I will link that up. But for the sake of just syncing up the audio in your video, that's what we're here to do right now. So here's my track. Here's our video. See what happens here. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode here. We're about to take off on a destination where I think my co-pilot may know where we are headed. So you see what happened there, where there was latency in the Zoom recording and the audio that I had laid down in the handheld recorder. They were not syncing up. So here's what can happen to you. If you're recording in Zoom and you have some delay that's occurring, but you're recording locally either on your handheld recorder or you're doing that Zencaster recording, those may not sync up. Here's what I recommend. Use your built-in webcam on if you have a laptop, or use your built-in webcam on something else like a phone or a webcam that's attached to your desktop or something like that if you want to be able to see each other. What I recommend is using your smartphone as a separate camera. And I say smartphone if you don't already have a camera, like I have several cameras that I can use. So use your smartphone separately, set that up on a tripod. I did a video about filming with an iPhone, so I will link that up. You can set that up separately because here's what I'll show you. Let's get rid of that. And let's actually toggle this on. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode here. We're about to take off on a destination where I think my co-pilot may know where we are headed, but I know when we get there, we are going to be probably discussing the pros and cons of whether this trip is going to land us at a hotel or an Airbnb or VRBO. All right, so you see, I actually recorded on this camera that I'm talking to you on right now. I recorded that separately out of the, off to the side. And there is no latency there because it's in my studio and I can sync it up very easily with my audio. So that is not an issue. That's why I say get a separate camera. Don't go out and purchase a separate camera. Use your smartphone. If you have a decent smartphone within the last couple of years, you'll get some decent video quality out of it, and just use that separately while using your built-in webcam for, the conversation that's occurring, because that latency is going to throw you off. And I was trying to fix this in post. It was very challenging because I always had to cut and paste and move things around. And honestly, that's just going to cost you so much time. So building off what I would recommend is you having your camera on your side and having your co-host having their own camera, and then bringing those clips in together. So when I'm talking, as an example, you see me in the screen, and then when she's talking, then she'll fill the screen. And again, there's a lot of editing that can happen here, but this is what you could get. A hotel, or maybe even a resort. I mean, we could even touch into resort territory, but really hotel. The differences, obviously, those are pretty, we know what the differences would be like on the surface, but what are the advantages and disadvantages of each one of them? And I think we really want to kind of break that down a little bit.
Absolutely. I think when you are starting to plan travel, that's one of the first questions you have to ask yourself, if not the first question,
And so that would be a rinse and repeat. So then when I start talking, then put me in the frame, and we would bring that piece of video in and basically just making all those cuts throughout the video. So when I'm talking, you'll see me. When she's talking, you'll see her. And just some advice, so some friendly advice, not trying to talk you out of it, but for every minute of video that you record, expect up to 8 minutes, maybe even 10 minutes of post-production for every minute of video that you've recorded. It just takes some time. And dialing in your video is fine, but getting the audio dialed in is the most important. And with these video editors, like I'm using Final Cut Pro here, but iMovie could be fine, and DaVinci Resolve, as I will link up to you here in the description below, but also some other video editors, you could clean your audio up and make it sound decent. But the most important thing is focusing on the audio aspect. So let's get into GarageBand. I don't typically use GarageBand myself. Like personally, I use something a little bit more advanced, but I think for many of you out there, you may be using something like GarageBand, especially if you're on a Mac OS, or you can even edit on your iPad or edit on your iPhone. Did a video on that as well. We'll link it up. So we are here in GarageBand, very simple. So taking a look here at the screen, you will see H6 track is me, Marie's local track, so on her side, and then Marie's H6 track, which was me recording her through the Zoom call. I just have that there as a reference. So you see, these are the spikes. And we actually did it twice because I wanted to record something. So we did this twice, and those are the spikes that lined up. So I don't need her H6 track anymore because her local track is going to sound so much better. So I could just mute it if I want to, or get rid of it altogether. So I could even just delete the track. Yep, I want to delete that. So now I'm just dealing with the 2 tracks. This looks a lot simpler, right? So adding a compressor to your tracks or your levels, just dialing that in. But what I would do is, okay, this is where we clapped, and this is where I actually started. So I would just cut here and then highlight those and then bring that here to the beginning when the show starts. And so then I would just do my intro as I was doing, and then what I can actually do is cut sections out. So if I was like and ah, or there were pauses, or we actually had a pause in here because something happened with the latency or something with the camera and we wanted to figure that out, and then I would just cut that out. So again, I've done videos on some editing for your podcast, so I don't want to go into great detail here because we'd be here forever, and I'm sure this is already long enough as it is. Focus on the audio first. All right, there you have it. Are you scared now to actually do a video podcast, especially a virtual co-host or guest setup? Hopefully you have the tools to at least get started. Remember, you have to practice. You have to just keep doing it over and over again. Rinse and repeat. Get good with the audio first, knowing that and getting that to where you need it to be. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave those below. I appreciate your time and attention on this one. Thank you so much for tuning in. Go out there and do those things that matter. You keep rocking the faces. I will keep creating some content here, some value for you, and I will catch you right back here on the next one.